Captain Robert Mitchell adjusted his coffee cup on the metal desk inside the underground capsule at Malmstrom Air Force Base, Montana. It was March 24, 1967, and the night shift at Echo Flight's Launch Control Center felt routine. The hum of electronic equipment filled the reinforced concrete chamber buried 60 feet beneath the frozen Montana prairie. Above ground, 10 Minuteman I intercontinental ballistic missiles stood ready in their silos, each carrying a nuclear warhead capable of devastating an entire city. At 28, Mitchell had been responsible for nuclear weapons for 3 years, but the weight never fully left his shoulders. His partner, Lieutenant David Harper, sat at the adjacent console reviewing maintenance reports with methodical precision. The two men had worked together for 8 months, developing the professional trust essential when managing weapons that could end civilization. The Launch Control Center was a marvel of 1960s military engineering. 2 massive blast doors secured the facility, designed to withstand anything short of a direct nuclear hit. Banks of computers monitored every aspect of the missile field, from individual warhead status to environmental conditions in each silo. Red phones connected them directly to Strategic Air Command headquarters. Outside, March wind howled across the desolate landscape, carrying the last bitter cold of Montana winter. The nearest town, Great Falls, lay 40 miles southwest, its lights barely visible on clear nights. For miles in every direction, nothing broke the monotony except occasional ranch houses and concrete launch facilities that dotted the prairie like technological tombstones. Mitchell glanced at the digital clock, 11:47 p.m. In 13 minutes, his shift would be halfway over. He reached for his logbook when the red phone suddenly rang with sharp, insistent tone that immediately commanded attention. In the nuclear missile business, middle-of-the-night calls were rarely routine. Chapter 2. The First Report. Lieutenant Harper answered the secure phone with practiced efficiency. Echo Flight, Lieutenant Harper speaking. His expression quickly shifted from routine alertness to confused concern as he listened. Mitchell watched his partner's face carefully, reading subtle changes that indicated something unusual was developing. Copy that, Security Team 4. Can you repeat your location and provide more detail? Harper's voice remained steady, but Mitchell could hear underlying tension. After 3 years in the missile field, both men had learned to distinguish between routine security reports and genuine anomalies. Harper covered the mouthpiece and turned to Mitchell. Security team reports unusual lights in the sky above launch facility Echo 7. They say the lights are moving in ways that don't match any known aircraft. Mitchell felt the familiar tightening in his stomach that came with unexpected developments during nuclear duty. The security team at Echo 7 consisted of 2 Air Force specialists responsible for protecting one of the 10 missile silos under Echo Flight's control. These were experienced personnel, trained to distinguish between normal air traffic, weather phenomena, and potential threats. Their report carried weight precisely because they weren't prone to false alarms. Ask them about duration, estimated altitude, and whether they've attempted radio contact, Mitchell instructed, already reaching for the status board showing the condition of all 10 missiles. Every indicator showed green, all systems normal, all missiles ready for launch if the unthinkable command ever came. Harper relayed the questions and listened intently. They say the lights have been visible for approximately 20 minutes, estimated altitude between 1 and 3,000 feet, moving in patterns that suggest intelligent control. No response to standard aviation frequencies. He paused. They're requesting permission to continue observation and asking if we want closer investigation. Mitchell made a quick decision. Tell them to maintain position, continue observation, and provide updates every 5 minutes. And get me command post. They need to know immediately. Chapter 3. Multiple witnesses. Within minutes, the red phone rang again. Security Team 2 from launch facility, Echo 3, located 6 miles northeast of Echo 7, reported remarkably similar phenomena. Unusual lights moving in patterns inconsistent with conventional aircraft. Estimated altitude between 1 and 3,000 feet. No response to radio contact attempts. Now we have 2 independent observation points, Mitchell muttered, reaching for the direct line to Malmstrom's command post. In the military, one unusual report might be dismissed as misidentification, but multiple independent reports from trained personnel demanded serious attention and proper notification. Lieutenant Colonel Peterson answered on the second ring. "Peterson here." Mitchell quickly briefed the colonel on both security team reports, emphasizing the professional credibility of observers and consistency of their descriptions. Peterson listened without interruption, occasionally asking for clarification on timing and locations. "Captain, I want you to maintain contact with all security teams and document everything," Peterson ordered. "I'm alerting the base commander and sending additional security personnel to both locations. This stays classified until we understand what we're dealing with." He paused. "Have you checked with approach control about unusual air traffic?" Harper was already dialing Malmstrom's approach control facility. After a brief conversation, he shook his head. "No scheduled military exercises, no known civilian aircraft in the area, and nothing on radar that corresponds to our security team's locations." The mystery was deepening. The underground launch control center, normally quiet refuge from the outside world, suddenly felt like the epicenter of something significant. Electronic equipment hummed with increased activity as both men worked phones and monitoring systems, trying to gather information and maintain situational awareness. Above them, 60 feet of steel and concrete separated them from whatever was happening in the Montana sky. At 12:15 a.m., Security Team 4 provided their scheduled update. The lights were still visible, now appearing to move in more organized patterns, almost as if conducting systematic observation of the missile field. Chapter 4. The pattern emerges. By 12:30 a.m., Security Teams 4 and 2 had been joined by additional personnel dispatched from the main base. The expanded observation teams now included senior security specialists and a technical sergeant with extensive aircraft identification experience. Their reports continued describing lights that moved with apparent intelligence and purpose, following patterns that defied conventional aviation knowledge. More disturbing was the systematic nature of the phenomenon. The lights appeared to be conducting what could only be described as methodical survey of Echo Flight's missile field. They moved from silo to silo with purpose, spending several minutes above each launch facility before proceeding to the next. The precision suggested knowledge of missile locations that should have been impossible for unauthorized aircraft. Captain Mitchell faced a situation never covered in training manuals. Nuclear missile officers were prepared for equipment failures, security breaches, and potential sabotage attempts, but nothing addressed unidentified aerial phenomena demonstrating apparent knowledge of classified military installations. "David, pull up the tactical display and plot the movement pattern they're describing," Mitchell instructed. Harper input the location data, and the result was unsettling. The lights were following logical sequence, visiting each missile silo in numerical order, Echo 1 through Echo 10, as if following predetermined flight plan corresponding to classified military maps. The implications were staggering. Individual missile silo locations were among the most closely guarded secrets in American defense. Only personnel with highest security clearances had access to detailed silo locations, compartmentalized on strict need-to-know basis. Yet whatever was generating these lights seemed to possess complete knowledge of Echo Flight's layout. At 12:45 a.m., Security Team 4 reported with increased urgency. "Echo Control, the lights are now directly above launch facility Echo 7. They're maintaining stationary position approximately 500 feet above the silo. The intensity has increased significantly, and we're observing what appears to be a beam of light directed downward toward the silo itself." Mitchell felt ice forming in his stomach. Launch facility Echo 7 contained a Minuteman I missile with nuclear warhead, maintained in constant ready status for potential launch within minutes of receiving proper authorization. Chapter 5. Technical Anomalies. At 1 a.m. exactly, every alarm in the Launch Control Center erupted simultaneously. Red warning lights bathed the underground facility in ominous glow, as computer systems began registering multiple system failures across Echo Flight's missile field. Mitchell and Harper moved with practiced efficiency, their training taking over despite the unprecedented nature of the developing situation. Echo 7 showing complete communications failure, Harper reported, his voice tight with concentration as he worked through emergency procedures. Echo 3 indicates power system irregularities. Echo 5 is reporting guidance system offline. The electronic displays that normally showed 10 green lights indicating operational missiles now displayed a disturbing pattern of red and yellow warnings. Mitchell was already on the secure phone to command post, providing real-time updates. Colonel Peterson, we're showing multiple system failures across the missile field. This is not routine maintenance or normal equipment problems. We've got 6 missiles showing various degrees of system compromise. What made the situation extraordinary was the correlation between technical failures and security teams' reports of light positions. As mysterious objects moved from silo to silo, corresponding technical problems appeared in underground systems that controlled those specific missiles. The pattern was too precise to be coincidental. "Sir, Echo 6 just went off alert status," Harper announced, using military terminology for a missile no longer ready for immediate launch. "Complete electrical system failure. All backup systems also showing offline." The lieutenant's professional calm was beginning to show cracks as implications of widespread missile failures sank in. In the nuclear missile business, simultaneous failure of multiple weapon systems was virtually impossible under normal circumstances. The missiles were designed with multiple redundant safety and operational systems specifically to prevent this kind of comprehensive failure. Each missile operated independently, with separate power supplies, communications systems, and backup procedures. Mitchell studied the status board with growing alarm. 7 of Echo Flight's 10 missiles were now showing significant system problems, ranging from communications failures to complete power loss. The 3 remaining operational missiles displayed intermittent irregularities, suggesting their systems were also compromised. Chapter 6. Command Authority. Lieutenant Colonel Peterson arrived at Echo Flight's Launch Control Center at 1:15 a.m., accompanied by Base Commander Colonel James Morrison and a technical team from Malmstrom's Missile Maintenance Squadron. The underground facility, normally occupied by only 2 officers, suddenly felt crowded as senior leadership assessed an unprecedented situation. "Captain, give me a complete briefing on everything that's happened since the first security report," Colonel Morrison ordered. His expression was grim as he studied the status board showing 7 of 10 missiles in various states of system failure. Morrison had commanded nuclear missile units for 15 years and had never encountered anything resembling this situation. Mitchell provided chronological summary of events, emphasizing correlation between reported light positions and subsequent missile system failures. He was careful to stick to documented facts, avoiding speculation about the cause of the apparent connection between aerial phenomena and technical problems. "What's the current status of our security teams in the field?" Morrison asked. Peterson consulted his notes from recent radio communications. "All teams report the lights are still visible and appear to be maintaining positions above specific silos. Teams 4 and 7 report the lights seem to be conducting detailed examination of their assigned facilities." The base commander turned to technical team leader Master Sergeant Rodriguez, who had extensive experience with Minuteman systems. "Sergeant, in your professional opinion, what could cause this pattern of coordinated failures across multiple independent missile systems?" Rodriguez studied the readouts carefully before responding. "Sir, under normal circumstances, this should be impossible. Each missile operates on independent systems with multiple backups. The only way to achieve this kind of coordinated shutdown would be through detailed knowledge of our specific technical procedures combined with access to classified maintenance protocols." The sergeant paused, clearly uncomfortable with implications. Colonel Morrison made a decision with far-reaching consequences. "I'm declaring security condition red for Echo Flight and requesting immediate technical assistance from Strategic Air Command. This situation is beyond anything in our normal operating procedures." He turned to Mitchell and Harper. "You two maintain your posts and continue documenting everything. This is now a matter of national security. At 1:30 a.m., the red phone brought news that elevated the situation to an entirely new level of concern. Chapter 7. Expanding Crisis. Colonel Thompson from Oscar Flight, located 20 miles south, delivered news that transformed a local security concern into potential crisis affecting America's nuclear deterrent capability. Jim, we're beginning to see similar phenomena here. Lights over our missile field and initial reports of system irregularities at Oscar 3 and Oscar 8. The realization that the phenomenon was not limited to Echo flight immediately elevated the situation beyond anything in existing protocols. Colonel Morrison contacted Strategic Air Command headquarters in Omaha while Peterson coordinated with other missile wings to determine the scope of the developing crisis. Within minutes, reports came from multiple locations across Montana. November Flight, 30 miles east, reported similar lights and initial technical problems. Delta Flight, located northwest of Malmstrom, confirmed unusual aerial activity beginning approximately 90 minutes earlier. The pattern was consistent, mysterious lights appearing over missile fields, followed by unexplained system failures. Master Sergeant Rodriguez was analyzing technical data from multiple missile flights, trying to identify common factors that might explain widespread failures. Colonel, the failure patterns are remarkably similar across all affected sites. We're seeing coordinated shutdowns of primary and backup systems in a sequence that suggests someone with detailed knowledge of our technical specifications. The implications were staggering. If hostile forces had somehow acquired the capability to remotely disable American nuclear missiles, the strategic balance that had maintained world peace for 20 years was suddenly in question. But the alternative explanation, that unknown aircraft were somehow interfering with nuclear weapons using technology beyond current human capability, was equally disturbing. Captain Mitchell continued monitoring Echo flight systems while providing regular updates to the expanding command staff. Of the 10 missiles under his control, only one remained fully operational. The others displayed various combinations of communications failures, power system problems, and guidance system irregularities that rendered them unavailable for launch even under direct presidential order. At 2:00 a.m., Security Team 4 provided an update that added another layer of mystery. Echo Control, the lights above Echo 7 have changed characteristics. Instead of steady glow, they're now pulsing in what appears to be regular pattern. The pulse rate seems to correspond to the missile's normal electrical system cycling. Chapter 8. Military Response. 2 F-106 Delta Dart interceptor aircraft took off from Malmstrom Air Force Base at 2:15 a.m. with orders to investigate the reported lights over Echo Flight's missile field. The fighters were equipped with advanced radar systems and weapon systems capable of engaging any known aircraft. Their pilots, Captain William Davis and Lieutenant Mark Sullivan, were experienced interceptor pilots with thousands of hours flying air defense missions. The fighters approached Echo Flight's area at 15,000 feet, using radar systems to search for the reported phenomena. Initial results were puzzling. Their instruments detected multiple targets that appeared and disappeared intermittently, displaying flight characteristics that seemed to violate basic principles of aerodynamics. Malmstrom Control, this is Sabre 1, Captain Davis reported. We have visual contact with multiple light sources above the missile field. They appear to be approximately 1,000 feet altitude, moving in patterns inconsistent with any known aircraft. Request permission to descend for closer investigation. Colonel Morrison, monitoring from Echo Flight's Launch Control Center, authorized the descent with specific instructions. Sabre 1, you are cleared to investigate, but maintain safe distance and do not engage unless directly threatened. We need identification and detailed observation of these objects. As the F-106 descended toward the lights, something unprecedented occurred. The mysterious objects seemed to respond to the approaching fighter aircraft by accelerating away at speeds that appeared impossible for any known technology. Captain Davis reported that his radar was tracking objects moving at velocities exceeding 3,000 miles per hour with instantaneous acceleration. Malmstrom Control, these objects are demonstrating flight capabilities that exceed anything in our technical knowledge. They're making 90-degree turns at high speed with no apparent deceleration. My radar is showing acceleration rates that would destroy any known aircraft. Davis's voice carried professional bewilderment mixed with grudging respect for whatever technology he was observing. Lieutenant Sullivan provided corroboration from the second aircraft. Confirm Sabre 1's report. These objects are moving in ways that violate everything we know about flight mechanics. They appear to be under intelligent control but using propulsion systems that don't match any known technology. On the ground, security teams watched as the lights responded to approaching fighter aircraft by performing maneuvers that seemed designed to avoid contact while maintaining observation of missile facilities. Chapter 9. Escalation. At 2:45 a.m., the situation escalated dramatically when additional lights appeared over 3 more missile fields across Montana. Strategic Air Command headquarters in Omaha was now coordinating responses to unexplained phenomena affecting nearly half of America's land-based nuclear deterrent. General Thomas Harrison, commander of Strategic Air Command, was awakened and briefed on a situation that defied all existing protocols. The scope of the phenomenon was becoming clear. Organized, intelligent entities were conducting what appeared to be systematic examination of America's most sensitive military installations while demonstrating capability to disable nuclear weapons at will. The implications for national security were staggering, but equally troubling was the apparent technological superiority of whatever forces were involved. Captain Mitchell received orders to attempt reactivation of Echo Flight's disabled missiles using emergency procedures that bypassed normal safety protocols. Working with Master Sergeant Rodriguez, they tried every technical option available to restore the missiles to operational status. The results were consistently negative. The weapons remained inoperable despite multiple attempts using different procedures. Captain, it's as if the missiles are receiving conflicting signals that override our control inputs, Rodriguez reported. The systems respond to our commands initially, but then something else takes priority and shuts them down again. I've never seen anything like this in 20 years of working with these systems. The F-106 interceptors continued their attempts to investigate the lights, but the objects maintained their distance while demonstrating flight capabilities that seemed to mock human aeronautical achievements. Captain Davis reported that his aircraft's instruments were detecting electromagnetic emissions from the objects that didn't match any known technology or natural phenomena. At 3:00 a.m., Colonel Morrison received a call that changed everything. The Pentagon was now aware of the situation and had classified it as a potential threat to national security requiring the highest level of attention. A special investigation team was being assembled to travel to Malmstrom immediately, and all personnel involved were being placed under strict secrecy orders. "Gentlemen," Morrison announced to the assembled staff, "this situation is now classified at the highest levels. Everything you've witnessed tonight falls under national security restrictions, and you're forbidden from discussing any aspect of these events with unauthorized personnel." The colonel's expression was grave as he emphasized the seriousness of the security requirements. Chapter 10. Dawn and Departure. As dawn broke over Montana's prairie landscape, the mysterious lights began to fade and disappear. Security teams across multiple missile fields reported that the objects were ascending to higher altitudes and moving away from the military installations. By 4:30 a.m., visual contact was lost completely, leaving behind only evidence of their presence, dozens of nuclear missiles that remained inoperable despite all attempts at restoration. The F-106 interceptors had tracked the objects as they departed, noting that they maintained their impossible flight characteristics until beyond radar range. Captain Davis's final report described objects accelerating to velocities exceeding 10,000 miles per hour while climbing to altitudes above 60,000 feet, performance that exceeded anything in the American military inventory by factors of magnitude. Captain Mitchell and Lieutenant Harper completed their duty shift at 6 a.m., but instead of going home, they were escorted to a secure briefing room where they spent the next 4 hours providing detailed statements about everything they had witnessed. Intelligence officers recorded their testimonies while emphasizing the classified nature of the information and severe consequences of unauthorized disclosure. Technical teams working on Echo Flight's missiles reported partial success in restoring some systems, but 3 missiles remained completely inoperable despite extensive troubleshooting efforts. Master Sergeant Rodriguez privately confided to Mitchell that the failure patterns suggested intervention by technology far beyond current human capabilities. "Captain, in my professional opinion, someone demonstrated the ability to selectively disable our most advanced weapon systems using methods we don't understand and can't counter," Rodriguez whispered during a brief break. "That's not something I want to put in any official report, but it's what the evidence suggests." By noon, special investigation teams from the Pentagon had arrived at Malmstrom, along with technical specialists from various defense contractors and government agencies. The base was placed under enhanced security, and all personnel involved in the night's events were subjected to extensive debriefings and polygraph examinations. The official investigation would continue for months, generating classified reports that would remain hidden from public view for decades. But for the men who had witnessed the events firsthand, no amount of official secrecy could erase the memory of the night when unknown forces had demonstrated their ability to neutralize America's nuclear deterrent with apparent ease. Chapter 11. The cover-up begins. Within 48 hours, a carefully orchestrated information management campaign was underway. Official reports filed with various military commands made no mention of unidentified lights or unexplained phenomena. Instead, the missile failures were attributed to a cascade of technical problems caused by a solar storm that had allegedly interfered with sensitive electronic systems. The solar storm explanation was technically plausible, since solar electromagnetic activity could theoretically affect military electronics. However, personnel present during the incident knew that no solar storm could account for the precise, methodical pattern of failures that had corresponded exactly to the movements of the mysterious lights. Captain Mitchell found himself summoned to additional briefings where intelligence officers repeatedly emphasized the importance of maintaining the official version of events. "Captain, your country's national security depends on limiting knowledge of what occurred," explained Colonel Sarah Webb from the Pentagon's Special Investigations Office. "There are aspects of this incident that could cause panic if misunderstood by the public." The classification of the incident extended beyond simple secrecy. Personnel who had been present were reassigned to different bases, separating the witnesses and making it difficult for them to compare experiences or maintain contact. Lieutenant Harper was transferred to a base in Germany within a month, while many security personnel were distributed across various assignments worldwide. Master Sergeant Rodriguez, whose technical expertise had been crucial in understanding the missile failures, was promoted and transferred to a research position at a classified facility in Nevada. Before his departure, he had a final conversation with Mitchell that revealed the depth of the military's concern. "Captain, I've been ordered to cease all documentation of the technical anomalies we observed," Rodriguez confided. "My analysis of the failure patterns has been classified beyond my access level, and I've been told to focus on conventional maintenance procedures from now on." The sergeant's expression suggested he understood the implications of being removed from further investigation. The F-106 pilots who had encountered the lights directly were subjected to the most intensive security procedures. Captain Davis and Lieutenant Sullivan were debriefed repeatedly by teams of investigators who seemed more interested in ensuring their silence than in understanding their observations. Chapter 12. Questions without answers. In the weeks following the incident, Captain Mitchell struggled with the disconnect between what he had experienced and what he was required to report. The official version of events bore little resemblance to the systematic, intelligent intervention that had disabled Echo Flight's nuclear missiles, while demonstrating flight capabilities that exceeded anything in human technology. The ongoing investigation, conducted by agencies whose names Mitchell was not authorized to know, occasionally required his participation in highly classified briefings. These sessions revealed that the Malmstrom incident was not unique. Similar events had occurred at other nuclear facilities over the previous 2 decades, but all had been classified and compartmentalized to prevent broader awareness. "Captain, you were part of an event that fits a pattern we've been tracking since the early 1950s, explained Dr. James Harrison, a civilian investigator whose credentials remained mysterious. Unidentified aerial phenomena have shown persistent interest in nuclear weapons facilities, but the Malmstrom incident represents the most dramatic demonstration of their apparent capabilities. The investigation revealed that nuclear facilities worldwide had experienced similar incidents, though most had been less extensive than the Malmstrom event. Soviet installations had reportedly experienced comparable phenomena, suggesting that whatever intelligence was behind these incidents was not limited to observing American facilities or motivated by conventional military intelligence gathering. Mitchell learned that a secret program existed within the military to monitor and investigate such incidents, but its findings were classified at levels that restricted access to only the highest government officials. The program's existence was compartmentalized to such a degree that most military personnel, including senior commanders, had no knowledge of its activities or conclusions. The technical analysis of the missile failures had produced conclusions that challenged fundamental assumptions about the security of nuclear weapons. The investigation determined that the failures had been caused by external electromagnetic interference that demonstrated precise knowledge of Minuteman system vulnerabilities, knowledge that should not have been accessible to any foreign intelligence service. More disturbing was the conclusion that whatever technology had been used to disable the missiles could potentially be used to launch them as well. The same electromagnetic interference that had shut down the weapons systems could theoretically be modified to trigger launch sequences, giving unknown entities the potential to start nuclear warfare using America's own weapons. Chapter 13. Psychological Impact. The psychological toll of the incident and its aftermath affected everyone who had been present during the event. Captain Mitchell found himself questioning not only the official version of events, but also broader assumptions about humanity's place in the universe and the security of civilization itself. Sleep became elusive as Mitchell replayed the night's events, particularly the systematic precision with which the unknown entities had disabled nuclear weapons. The realization that forces with incomprehensible technology had demonstrated their ability to neutralize America's nuclear deterrent at will created a sense of vulnerability that conventional military training had not prepared him to handle. Dr. Stevens, the psychiatrist assigned to monitor the psychological well-being of witnesses, observed that the classification requirements created additional stress by preventing personnel from discussing their experiences with family members or mental health professionals without proper clearance. The isolation and secrecy compounded the natural psychological impact of witnessing unexplained phenomena. Captain Mitchell is experiencing what we might call ontological shock, Dr. Arte. Stevens explained in her confidential report. The witness's fundamental understanding of reality has been challenged by observations that don't fit within conventional scientific or military frameworks. The additional stress of enforced secrecy prevents normal psychological processing of the experience. Lieutenant Harper, before his transfer to Germany, had confided to Mitchell that he was having difficulty maintaining relationships with family and friends who couldn't understand his changed demeanor without knowing the cause. How do you explain to your wife that you can't sleep because you've seen proof that everything we think we know about technology and security is wrong? Harper had asked. The security personnel who had observed the lights directly were experiencing similar psychological effects. Several had requested transfers to non-nuclear assignments, unable to continue working around weapons they now knew could be disabled by unknown forces. Their requests were generally denied to maintain operational security, but alternative duties were sometimes arranged within classified programs. The isolation created by classification requirements meant that witnesses couldn't seek support from normal channels. Family members noticed changes in behavior and mood, but were told only that classified work was causing stress. Mental health professionals couldn't provide adequate support without understanding the specific nature of the trauma, creating a cycle of psychological pressure that affected job performance and personal relationships. Chapter 14. Official Denials. As months passed, the official narrative became increasingly rigid and comprehensive. Any mention of unexplained phenomena at nuclear facilities was met with immediate denial and, when necessary, disciplinary action against personnel who violated classification requirements. The military's public position became that no unusual events had occurred at any nuclear facilities, and that all reported incidents were explainable through conventional means. The solar storm explanation for the Malmstrom incident was refined and expanded, with supporting documentation created to substantiate the official version. Meteorological records were selectively cited to support claims of electromagnetic activity on the night in question, while contradictory evidence was classified or omitted from public records. Captain Mitchell discovered the extent of the denial campaign when he attempted to research the incident using official channels. Records that he knew had existed, including some he had personally helped create, were no longer accessible through normal military databases. Technical reports analyzing the missile failures had been reclassified at levels beyond his clearance, effectively erasing official acknowledgement of the anomalies he had witnessed. The F-106 pilots who had pursued the lights found their flight records altered to show routine training missions rather than investigations of unidentified phenomena. Captain Davis privately expressed frustration that his detailed reports of objects demonstrating impossible flight characteristics had been replaced with generic accounts of unsuccessful attempts to identify conventional aircraft. Personnel who made unauthorized attempts to discuss the incident found themselves subject to investigation by military intelligence services. Several witnesses reported being visited by agents who reminded them of their secrecy obligations and warned of consequences for unauthorized disclosure. The message was clear. Official silence about the incident was not optional. The denial campaign extended to interactions with congressional oversight committees and other government agencies. When routine questions were asked about the operational status of missile systems, the responses made no mention of unexplained failures or external interference. The incident was effectively erased from official military history, except within the most highly classified intelligence channels. The irony was not lost on Mitchell that in order to protect the credibility of America's nuclear weapons, the military was denying that those weapons had proven vulnerable to unknown technology. The official position prioritized perception over reality, even when that reality had profound implications for national defense planning. Chapter 15. International Implications. Through his involvement in the classified investigation, Captain Mitchell learned that the Malmstrom incident was part of a global pattern of unexplained phenomena at nuclear facilities. Intelligence sharing between allied nations had revealed similar events in Britain, France, and other countries with nuclear weapons programs, suggesting a worldwide interest in humanity's most destructive technologies. Soviet installations had reportedly experienced comparable incidents, according to intelligence reports that Mitchell was occasionally allowed to review. The similarity of events across different political and technological systems indicated that whatever intelligences were involved were not motivated by conventional military or political considerations. Captain, we're facing something that transcends the Cold War framework that dominates our strategic thinking, explained Dr. Harrison during a briefing that included classified intelligence from multiple sources. These incidents occur regardless of political systems, suggesting motivations that don't fit our understanding of traditional threats or intelligence gathering. The international scope of the phenomenon raised questions about whether traditional national security classifications were adequate for dealing with a global issue. Some intelligence officials privately argued for increased cooperation between nations, including sharing information with the Soviet Union, to better understand what appeared to be a common concern for all nuclear-armed countries. However, the prevailing view within the American intelligence community was that any information sharing could compromise sources and methods, while providing potential adversaries with insights into American vulnerabilities. The decision was made to maintain strict compartmentalization of information, even if it meant limiting the ability to understand patterns that crossed national boundaries. Mitchell learned that a secret international working group existed among NATO allies to monitor and investigate nuclear-related incidents, but even this limited cooperation was constrained by national security requirements that prevented full information sharing. Each country maintained its own classification systems and restrictions, making comprehensive analysis difficult. The global nature of the phenomenon also raised questions about the adequacy of national defense strategies based on nuclear deterrence. If unknown entities possessed the technology to disable nuclear weapons at will, the entire strategic balance that had maintained peace since World War II was potentially meaningless. Chapter 16. Long-term consequences. In the years following the incident, Captain Mitchell watched as the military quietly implemented changes that seemed designed to address vulnerabilities exposed by the Malmstrom events. New security protocols were established for nuclear facilities, including enhanced electromagnetic shielding and backup systems designed to function independently of primary control networks. The modifications were officially described as routine upgrades and improvements, but personnel familiar with the Malmstrom incident recognized them as responses to demonstrated weaknesses. The new systems were designed to prevent the kind of coordinated shutdown that had disabled Echo Flight's missiles, though whether they would be effective against the unknown technology remained unclear. Mitchell's career progressed normally on the surface, but he found himself gradually moved away from direct involvement with nuclear weapons. His expertise and experience were valued, but his assignment to non-nuclear roles seemed designed to distance him from situations where his special knowledge might become relevant or problematic. The psychological impact of the incident continued to affect his worldview and relationships. Marriage became difficult when fundamental aspects of his professional experience couldn't be shared, and friendships were strained by his inability to explain changes in his personality and outlook. The isolation created by classification requirements had lasting effects that extended far beyond his military service. Other witnesses faced similar challenges. Lieutenant Harper's marriage ended in divorce within 2 years of the incident, and several security personnel experienced difficulties maintaining civilian relationships after completing their military service. The hidden cost of the secrecy requirements included damaged personal lives and ongoing psychological stress for those who had witnessed events they could never discuss. Master Sergeant Rodriguez eventually left active duty and found work in the private sector, but his experience with unexplained technology continued to influence his technical perspectives. Colleagues noted his tendency to design systems with unusual redundancies and electromagnetic protections that seemed excessive for conventional threats, but made sense to someone who had witnessed advanced interference capabilities. The F-106 pilots eventually transitioned to civilian aviation careers, but both reported ongoing unease when flying in areas where they had encountered the unexplained phenomena. Captain Davis privately admitted that his confidence in conventional aircraft performance had been permanently altered by observing technology that violated accepted principles of aerodynamics and propulsion. Chapter 17. Technological mysteries. As civilian technology advanced in subsequent decades, Captain Mitchell, now retired from active duty but working as a defense contractor, found himself comparing new developments to what he had witnessed at Malmstrom. The emergence of computer networks, satellite communications, and precision guidance systems made the 1967 incident seem even more remarkable in retrospect. The unknown entities had demonstrated real-time coordination across multiple missile fields separated by dozens of miles, suggesting communication capabilities that exceeded anything available to human technology in 1967. Their apparent knowledge of detailed technical specifications for classified weapons systems implied intelligence-gathering capabilities that remained beyond human achievement decades later. Mitchell worked with teams developing next-generation missile defense systems and found himself advocating for protections against electromagnetic interference that his colleagues considered excessive. He couldn't explain the specific threat he was concerned about, but his reputation for technical competence ensured that his recommendations received serious consideration. The precision with which the unknown technology had targeted specific systems while leaving others unaffected suggested capabilities that current human technology could barely approach, even with advanced computer systems. The entities had somehow identified and manipulated individual components within complex weapons systems without causing collateral damage to adjacent equipment. Analysis of the incident by technical specialists with modern expertise concluded that the electromagnetic interference had been directed with surgical precision, affecting only those systems necessary to prevent missile launch while preserving functions needed for basic maintenance and monitoring. This level of selectivity required intimate knowledge of system architecture, combined with the ability to generate precisely controlled electromagnetic fields. The flight characteristics observed by the F-106 pilots, instantaneous acceleration, 90-degree turns at high speed, and velocities exceeding 10,000 miles per hour, remained impossible according to conventional aerodynamics. Even theoretical propulsion systems under development by aerospace companies could not account for the observed performance capabilities. Dr. Harrison, the civilian investigator, maintained contact with Mitchell for years after the incident, occasionally sharing insights from ongoing research into similar events. "Captain, every advance in our technology makes what you witnessed seem more rather than less remarkable," Harrison observed during one of their meetings. "We're still decades away from achieving even a fraction of the capabilities those entities demonstrated." Chapter 18. Cover Stories. Unravel. By the 1980s, the official solar storm explanation for the Malmstrom incident was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain as more sophisticated analysis tools became available. Atmospheric scientists with access to improved historical data could find no evidence of electromagnetic activity sufficient to cause the reported system failures on the night in question. Former personnel who had been transferred or reassigned began to retire from military service, and some expressed frustration with the continuing classification of events they believed the public should know about. The passage of time had not diminished their conviction that they had witnessed something of profound significance that transcended normal military security concerns. Captain Mitchell, now a civilian defense contractor, found himself in the awkward position of working on projects designed to address vulnerabilities that officially had never been demonstrated. He participated in meetings where engineers discussed protecting missile systems from electromagnetic interference, without acknowledging the specific incident that had revealed those vulnerabilities. The F-106 pilots, both now airline captains, occasionally encountered aviation professionals who had heard rumors about unusual incidents at nuclear facilities. Their standard response was to refer questioners to official Air Force sources, but their reluctance to discuss the subject only fueled speculation about what they had actually witnessed. Lieutenant Harper, working as a civilian engineer in Germany, was approached by European researchers investigating similar incidents at NATO nuclear facilities. The consistency of reports across different countries and time periods was creating pressure for more open investigation, but classification requirements prevented him from contributing to research that might have advanced understanding of the phenomena. Master Sergeant Rodriguez, now a senior engineer with a major defense contractor, found his technical expertise increasingly valuable as the military sought to address system vulnerabilities that had been demonstrated at Malmstrom. However, his recommendations for specific types of electromagnetic shielding could not be fully explained without referencing classified incidents. Dr. Stevens published research papers on the psychological effects of witnessing unexplained phenomena, using case studies that carefully avoided identifying details about the Malmstrom incident. Her work contributed to understanding of how individuals cope with experiences that challenge conventional scientific paradigms, but the full significance of her research remained hidden by classification requirements. The accumulation of similar incidents at nuclear facilities worldwide was creating a body of evidence that some intelligence officials believed should be examined more openly. However, the institutional momentum of secrecy and the potential embarrassment of acknowledging past denials made it increasingly difficult to change the official position. Chapter 19. New Generations, Old Secrets. As the Cold War ended and new personnel took responsibility for nuclear weapons systems, the institutional memory of the Malmstrom incident began to fade. Younger officers managing missile fields had no knowledge of the vulnerabilities that had been demonstrated in 1967, and the protective measures implemented in response were explained as routine technological improvements. Captain Mitchell, now in his 50s and working as a senior consultant on missile defense systems, occasionally encountered young engineers who couldn't understand why certain electromagnetic protections were considered essential. He found himself in the frustrating position of advocating for expensive defensive measures without being able to explain the specific threat they were designed to counter. The original witnesses were aging, and some had died without ever being able to publicly discuss their experiences. The institutional pressure to maintain secrecy meant that valuable technical knowledge about demonstrated vulnerabilities was at risk of being lost as personnel retired or passed away. New threats to nuclear security were emerging: cyber warfare, terrorist organizations, and rogue nations with developing nuclear programs. But the lessons learned from the Malmstrom incident remained locked in classified files. Military planners developing strategies to protect nuclear weapons from modern threats had no access to information about the most significant demonstration of system vulnerabilities in the history of nuclear warfare. Lieutenant Harper, now retired and living in civilian anonymity, watched news reports about nuclear proliferation and security concerns with the knowledge that the most serious threat to nuclear weapons might come from sources that governments refuse to acknowledge or discuss. His inability to contribute to public policy debates about nuclear security created a sense of responsibility unfulfilled. The technical specifications for modern nuclear weapons included protections against electromagnetic interference that had been developed in response to the Malmstrom incident, but the rationale for these expensive measures was not fully understood by current generation personnel. Budget pressures sometimes led to questioning of costly defensive systems whose necessity wasn't adequately explained by official threat assessments. Master Sergeant Rodriguez, approaching retirement from his civilian career, considered writing a technical memoir about his military experience, but was constrained by classification requirements that remained in effect decades after the original incident. Chapter 20. Modern Relevance. The technological capabilities demonstrated at Malmstrom in 1967 seemed less impossible as human technology advanced into the 21st century. Precision electromagnetic interference, real-time coordination of multiple systems, and detailed knowledge of classified technical specifications were becoming achievable through cyber warfare and advanced electronic systems, though still not at the level observed during the incident. Captain Mitchell, now retired but occasionally consulting on advanced defense projects, noted that modern concerns about cyber attacks on nuclear systems echoed the vulnerabilities demonstrated decades earlier. The threat of remote interference with nuclear weapons had evolved from unexplained phenomena to potential capabilities of hostile nations and terrorist organizations. The global positioning systems, satellite communications, and computer networks that modern nuclear weapons depended on created new vulnerabilities that were similar in some ways to what had been demonstrated at Malmstrom. However, the precision and apparent knowledge of classified systems shown by the 1967 entities still exceeded any known human capabilities. Intelligence agencies were tracking developments in electromagnetic warfare and cyber attack capabilities by foreign powers, but their threat assessments made no reference to the demonstrated vulnerabilities from the Malmstrom incident. The classification of that information meant that current defensive measures might be inadequate against threats that had already been proven possible. International terrorism and nuclear proliferation created new scenarios where non-state actors might seek to disable or commandeer nuclear weapons. But security planning couldn't incorporate lessons learned from the most successful demonstration of such capabilities in history. The compartmentalization of classified information meant that valuable defensive insights remained inaccessible to those responsible for current security. Military exercises and war games designed to test nuclear security procedures didn't include scenarios based on the type of coordinated systematic interference that had disabled Echo Flight's missiles. The official denial of the incident meant that defensive strategies weren't developed to counter threats that had already been proven effective. Lieutenant Harper, following international security developments through civilian news sources, recognized patterns in reported cyber attacks and electromagnetic warfare that resembled aspects of what he had witnessed decades earlier. However, his inability to discuss the classified incident meant he couldn't contribute to public understanding of emerging threats to nuclear security. Chapter 21. The Price of Silence. The long-term cost of maintaining secrecy about the Malmstrom incident extended beyond the personal lives of witnesses to include broader implications for nuclear security and scientific understanding. Valuable information about demonstrated vulnerabilities remained locked away from researchers and security specialists who might have developed effective countermeasures. Captain Mitchell calculated that billions of dollars had been spent on defensive systems designed to address vulnerabilities revealed by the incident, but the full rationale for these expenditures couldn't be explained to Congress or the public. The hidden costs of classification included reduced efficiency in defense spending and missed opportunities for international cooperation on shared security concerns. The psychological toll on witnesses had created a generation of experts who possessed unique knowledge about nuclear security but were prevented from sharing their insights. Their enforced silence meant that valuable expertise was being lost as they aged and retired without being able to train successors or contribute to research that might improve nuclear safety. Dr. Stevens's research suggested that the pattern of secrecy and denial had created secondary victims among family members and colleagues who were affected by the changed behavior of witnesses but couldn't understand its cause. The classification requirements had imposed costs on innocent civilians who never chose to be involved with classified information. The international implications of maintained secrecy included missed opportunities for cooperation between nations facing similar challenges. If nuclear facilities worldwide were experiencing comparable incidents, coordinated research and defensive measures might be more effective than national approaches, but classification requirements prevented such cooperation. Scientific understanding of electromagnetic phenomena and unexplained aerial capabilities might have advanced more rapidly if researchers had access to data from the Malmstrom incident and similar events. The compartmentalization of information meant that civilian scientists working on related problems couldn't access the most significant observational data available. Master Sergeant Rodriguez privately estimated that his technical innovations in electromagnetic shielding might have developed differently if he could have collaborated with other engineers who had encountered similar challenges. The classification requirements forced duplication of research and prevented efficient sharing of solutions to demonstrated problems. The credibility of official institutions was undermined by the gap between public denials and classified reality. Personnel who knew the truth about significant events were forced to publicly support explanations they knew to be false, creating internal conflicts that affected trust in leadership and institutional integrity. Chapter 22. Legacy. Questions. More than 50 years after the incident, fundamental questions remained unanswered about the nature and implications of what had occurred at Malmstrom Air Force Base. The identity of the entities that had demonstrated such advanced capabilities was still unknown, and their motivations remained a matter of speculation among those with access to classified information. Captain Mitchell, now in his 80s, reflected on a career spent managing nuclear weapons while knowing they could be disabled by unknown forces. The cognitive dissonance of maintaining America's nuclear deterrent while understanding its demonstrated vulnerabilities had shaped his entire professional perspective and personal worldview. The advancement of human technology had made some aspects of the Malmstrom incident seem less impossible, but key elements, particularly the flight characteristics observed by fighter pilots and the precision of electromagnetic interference, still exceeded known capabilities. Whatever intelligence had been responsible possessed technology that remained decades ahead of human achievement. The global scope of similar incidents suggested that humanity's nuclear capabilities were of interest to intelligences with resources and technology far exceeding any earthly nation. Whether this interest represented benevolent concern, scientific curiosity, or something more ominous remained unclear from the available evidence. The pattern of incidents occurring specifically at nuclear facilities raised questions about whether these entities were attempting to communicate something about nuclear weapons or their implications for human civilization. Some analysts privately speculated that the demonstrations might represent warnings about the dangers of nuclear warfare or attempts to prevent nuclear conflicts. The precision with which the unknown technology had disabled weapons without causing permanent damage suggested a level of sophistication that went beyond simple military capabilities. The entities had demonstrated the ability to selectively interfere with nuclear systems while preserving other functions, implying detailed understanding of human technology and perhaps restraint in its application. Lieutenant Harper, now retired and free to reflect on his experience without the pressures of active duty, concluded that the incident had demonstrated humanity's technological limitations more than any specific threat. The realization that others possessed capabilities so far beyond human achievement was humbling and potentially transformative for understanding humanity's place in the universe. The continuing classification of the incident meant that its lessons remained unavailable to inform public policy about nuclear weapons, international security, and humanity's relationship with potentially advanced civilizations. Chapter 23. Unresolved Mysteries. As Captain Mitchell approached the end of his life, the Malmstrom incident remained officially classified and publicly denied, despite the passage of more than half a century. The men who had witnessed the systematic disabling of America's nuclear deterrent had carried their secret through entire careers and into retirement, bound by classification requirements that outlasted the Cold War context that had originally justified them. The technical mystery of how the unknown entities had achieved such precise control over nuclear weapon systems was never solved, despite decades of investigation by the most advanced human experts. The electromagnetic interference techniques demonstrated in 1967 remained beyond human capability well into the 21st century, suggesting either revolutionary breakthroughs in physics or technology based on scientific principles not yet discovered by human researchers. The broader implications of the incident for humanity's understanding of its place in the universe remained unexplored in public discourse because of the official denial that such events had ever occurred. Questions about the existence of advanced non-human intelligence, the security of nuclear weapons, and the adequacy of Earth's defense capabilities couldn't be addressed without acknowledging the evidence that remained locked in classified files. Mitchell's final reflection on the incident was that it had revealed both the vulnerability of human civilization and the restraint shown by whatever entities possessed such advanced capabilities. The systematic demonstration of the ability to disable nuclear weapons had been conducted without causing permanent damage or loss of life, suggesting motivations more complex than simple hostility or conquest. The witnesses to the incident had been transformed by their experience, carrying knowledge that challenged fundamental assumptions about technology, security, and humanity's cosmic situation. Their enforced silence had prevented them from contributing to public understanding of issues that might be crucial for humanity's future development and survival. The classification of the Malmstrom incident represented a decision by government officials to prioritize short-term stability and nuclear deterrent credibility over long-term understanding and adaptation to evidence of advanced, non-human capabilities. Whether this decision served humanity's best interests remained an open question that couldn't be properly debated without access to the classified information. As the original witnesses aged and died, taking their first-hand knowledge to their graves, the opportunity to learn from their experience was being lost to secrecy requirements that no longer served their original purpose. The price of silence was becoming the permanent loss of insights that might have advanced human understanding of technology, consciousness, and our relationship with the cosmos. The lights that had appeared over nuclear missiles in 1967 had demonstrated capabilities that remained unexplained and unmatched by human technology decades later. Whatever intelligence had been responsible for the systematic disabling of America's most powerful weapons had departed as mysteriously as it had arrived, leaving behind only questions that official secrecy prevented from being asked publicly.